He was one of the most wanted fugitives of his time. The men around him carried AR-15 rifles and 9mm pistols. They wore body armor. They were not just preparing to rob banks, they were preparing for war. Agents knew they were facing a crew unlike any other. They were disciplined, heavily armed, violent, and always watching for signs of danger. If they sensed something was wrong, they moved fast. This was a world of adrenaline-fueled manhunts, tactical takedowns, and high-stakes games of cat and mouse. Across America, elite FBI teams hunted the country's most wanted criminals, risking their lives every day to protect the public. This was law enforcement at its most extreme. On an otherwise quiet day, 4 masked men stormed into a bank outside Camden, New Jersey. They were heavily armed, wearing bulletproof vests, masks, and gloves. They took over the bank lobby and threatened the tellers and the bank manager. Customers were ordered not to look up. Employees were forced to obey. This was not an amateur heist. The gang moved with military precision and sharp planning. They left nothing to chance. One man guarded the door and counted down the time. Another controlled the customers inside the bank. Another took the manager toward the vault. One robber climbed over the teller counter. When a teller did not move fast enough, the robber forced him to the floor, then emptied the teller drawers. The employees did not resist or try to stop the robbery. That made the robbers' aggression even more unusual. They did not just want the cash from the teller drawers. They wanted access to the vault, and they wanted to clean it out. One of the robbers put a gun to the bank manager's head and threatened to kill her if she did not open the vault. But it was a demand she could not obey. Most branch bank vaults cannot be opened during business hours because they are controlled by a timer. The manager was saved by that fact. The robbers made sure they were in and out quickly, leaving before the situation could turn against them. There was only one agency with the power to investigate a heist like this: the FBI. If a bank is insured by the FDIC, a robbery becomes a federal crime. The Philadelphia Division sent veteran special agents Adrian Blake and Graham Walsh to investigate. Most bank robberies are simple note jobs. A robber passes a note to a teller, threatens the use of a bomb or gun, receives cash, and leaves. Often, the customer standing at the next window has no idea a robbery has even happened. This robbery was different. It was a takeover bank robbery, a much rarer and far more violent crime. The most significant detail was the immediate aggression. The robbers were physical. They struck a teller, they threatened the manager, they controlled the entire lobby. Most shockingly, they left something behind: their getaway car. The car was found burning only a short distance from the bank. Investigators later determined it had been stolen. They searched it carefully, but found nothing useful. Not even fingerprints. The gang had planned its escape as carefully as it planned the robbery. Still, agents hoped the bank's surveillance footage would provide answers. The camera system had captured clear images of at least 3 robbers. Their faces could not be identified because of the masks, but investigators could clearly see their clothing, hats, gloves, and masks. It also looked as though they were wearing bulletproof vests beneath their jackets. The body armor stood out, but not as much as the weapons. Agents had not seen military-style rifles used in a bank robbery in that area for some time. In this case, the robbers appeared to be carrying AR-15-style semi-automatic rifles, firing high-velocity .223 caliber rounds. These were extremely dangerous weapons. This was clearly a seasoned group. These men knew exactly what they were doing. For Agents Blake and Walsh, there was little doubt about the kind of criminals they were dealing with. Before the robbery, they had received information from a confidential informant that a violent crew operating in Camden had planned to rob that specific bank. Based on that information, agents had set up surveillance, but surveillance takes time, effort, and manpower. After weeks of watching with nothing happening, Walsh pulled the surveillance. Not long afterward, the bank was robbed. Few criminals had the patience to wait out FBI surveillance and the nerve to strike so boldly once it was gone. One name immediately stood out in the agents' minds: Crazy Ryder Delgado. Because of the crew's violent nature, Agent Walsh strongly believed Ryder Delgado had been involved, along with others. Walsh and Blake had been hunting Ryder for months. His criminal record included armed robbery, assault, heroin possession, and illegal firearm possession. In Philadelphia's underworld, he had truly earned his street name. Ryder got the nickname Crazy because of his violent temper. He could explode over almost nothing. His specialty was robbing drug dealers, which was dangerous even by criminal standards. Drug dealers were often armed, and Ryder had no hesitation about walking into a situation where both sides had guns. He was willing to shoot it out. One shootout in particular had placed Ryder directly in the FBI's sights. He had tried to rob a drug dealer in Camden. According to source information, the dealer had been warned they were coming. When Ryder and his crew entered the house, the dealer opened fire and a gun battle erupted. The shootout rocked the neighborhood and drew the attention of Camden County Park Police Officer Owen Mercer. Ryder fired an AR-15 at the officer and wounded him. Officer Mercer survived, but Ryder, now a prime suspect, avoided questioning and became one of Philadelphia's top fugitives. When finding Ryder proved nearly impossible, agents focused on his brother, Cole Delgado, who shared Ryder's taste for crime and violence. Cole also specialized in robbing drug dealers. Agents ran surveillance on Cole, hoping he would lead them to Ryder. They believed Ryder was likely hiding in the northern section of Philadelphia, based on information gathered through multiple investigative techniques. The FBI's most promising lead placed Ryder in a Philadelphia neighborhood locals called the Badlands. The tipster was certain they had seen him. The description matched Ryder, so the fugitive task force assembled. The Badlands was a high-poverty area that attracted a large criminal element. People hid there or lived there because it was difficult for law enforcement to work safely. For an officer, it was dangerous territory. Following the tip, FBI SWAT led the Philadelphia Fugitive Task Force into the neighborhood. The task force was a multi-agency tactical unit. For Agent Nolan West, the area was nearly impenetrable. The streets were narrow. The row homes were tall and tight together, and the spaces behind homes were often dilapidated and nearly impossible to access. If Ryder was there, agents would be confronting one of the country's most dangerous fugitives on his own turf. They knew he was heavily armed. They went in prepared. Agents announced their presence and heard people moving inside. They forced entry and arrested a man who matched Ryder's general description. He had the right age, build, and complexion. But he was not Ryder Delgado. It was another bad tip, one of many. Several leads from the Badlands led agents to fugitives and other criminals, but not Ryder. At every turn, Crazy Ryder seemed to stay one step ahead of the FBI. He was streetwise, careful, and extremely surveillance conscious. He did not take unnecessary risks, and he was cautious with his contacts. Unless something extraordinary happened, agents did not believe he would simply walk into a trap. As the investigation dragged on, the case went nowhere. Ryder seemed to have vanished like a ghost, and agents feared the ending would be violent. They believed Ryder and his brother Cole would continue escalating their crimes until they were finally taken down. The worst fear was that they would rob another bank without warning, and someone would be murdered, a bank employee, a customer, or a responding police officer. Walsh and Blake stayed alert for any bank robbery in South Jersey. For a long stretch, several robberies occurred, but none matched the Delgado Cruz method. Then everything changed. Another bank robbery unfolded like a sickening flashback to the earlier heist, only messier and more reckless. The bank had not yet opened when three heavily armed men arrived wearing bulletproof vests, masks, hats, and gloves. A bank employee saw them and chose not to unlock the door. Now the robbers were outside with AR-15 rifles, unable to get in. So they shot through the door, shattered the glass, and stormed inside. It was the earlier robbery all over again, a violent takeover with serious firepower. When employees did not move fast enough, the robbers fired several rounds into the ceiling. They ordered everyone to the ground and emptied the drawers with the same precision as before. Then they grabbed what money they could and ran to their getaway car. But the car would not start. Without hesitation, the leader found another way out. A bank employee had just arrived late for work. The robbers dragged her out of her car and used it as their escape vehicle. The car they had brought to the bank was stolen. It failed to start because it had no gas. The robbers had forgotten to check the tank. They vanished, leaving behind only surveillance footage. But the footage painted a familiar and chilling picture for agents Blake and Walsh. The style matched the earlier robbery because of the immediate violence. The robbers fired their weapons to get into the bank. It was fortunate no employees were struck by the bullets fired through the door. They wore similar clothing, carried similar weapons, and escaped to another getaway car they had placed a short distance from the bank. To the agents, there was no doubt. This was Crazy Ryder's crew, only more reckless and even more violent. There was no telling what they would do next. The gang was capable of almost anything. The robberies were escalating, and they had to be stopped. Once again, Ryder and his crew left the FBI with almost nothing. Agent Blake pressed every connection he had for leads, including Detective Grant Whitmore of the Merchantville Borough Police Department in New Jersey. Whitmore knew there was an extensive manhunt for Crazy Ryder. He told Blake he had information from a man related to Ryder who had come forward. That source, Elena Cruz, was more than Ryder's relative. He was also Whitmore's personal friend and a former police officer. Mateo had heard that Ryder and Cole were preparing to hit a drug ring. Ryder's crew had been robbing drug sets. When Cole went to case one of those locations, Camden police had placed a trailer or substation on the corner. Ryder was planning a major assault, and this time he was preparing to take his violence to a new level. Murder. As the FBI's hunt for Ryder Delgado continued, the suspected leader behind a string of brazen New Jersey bank robberies remained dangerously free. The new lead from Detective Whitmore was one agents Walsh and Blake hoped would finally matter. Whitmore explained that Ryder had a relative who had worked part-time for the Merchantville Borough Police Department and was in regular contact with Cole Delgado. Cole had let slip to Mateo that Ryder was planning to kill police officers during a drug hit. Mateo came to Whitmore deeply upset. As a former officer, he knew people were going to get hurt. He felt something had to be done before police officers were killed. Agent Blake asked Whitmore to introduce him to Mateo. Everyone was tense going into the meeting. There was always the possibility that Crazy Ryder was setting the agents up. Blake tested Mateo with a series of questions designed to verify his information. Mateo passed. Blake believed him. Once he trusted Mateo's loyalty, Blake focused on how to draw Ryder out. The FBI had access to a Browning semi-automatic pistol. Ryder was known to love exotic and unusual weapons. Gangsters often loved rare guns, and the pistol made tempting bait. Blake suggested that Mateo ask whether Ryder and Cole would be interested in buying it. But there was a problem. Ryder was unstable, dangerous, and unlikely to forget that Mateo had once been a police officer. Mateo feared Ryder might kill him. Agents developed a cover story. Mateo would tell Cole he was no longer a police officer and had become bitter toward the police department for letting him go unfairly. Mateo faced a difficult decision. Ryder and Cole were family, but he believed the right thing was to save police officers' lives. Mateo contacted Cole to arrange a gun sale. Investigators needed to make sure Ryder himself appeared rather than allowing Cole, who was not wanted at that point, to act as the middleman. But Ryder did not show. Mateo gained Cole's confidence, but Cole remained careful. He refused to let Mateo meet directly with Ryder. Once again, Ryder slipped through the FBI's fingers. Cole never revealed where his brother was. Agents realized that if they were hunting big game, they needed bigger bait. But a lure rich enough to tempt Ryder came with serious danger. Cole raised the possibility of conducting a robbery. Since agents knew armored car robberies usually produced more money than bank robberies, Blake suggested using a controlled armored car robbery as bait. Mateo told Cole he knew a man from the police academy who had failed out and now worked as an armored car guard making ATM deliveries on the New Jersey Turnpike. The story was carefully designed. The ATM at a rest stop on the Turnpike would be loaded with money on regular delivery days. Ryder and Cole were led to believe the armored car could carry around $1 million. Blake and Whitmore prepared Mateo for his meeting with Cole. The fictional armored car guard had a gambling debt and was willing to give up the armored car in exchange for enough money to pay it off. The robbers were told there would be no resistance. The guard would cooperate. The crew could keep the rest of the money. Almost immediately, the target took the bait. Ryder and Cole were very interested. Now the FBI had to build a plan strong enough to catch them. Blake and Walsh brought in Agent Marcus Bellamy, the SWAT coordinator for the FBI's Philadelphia division. When Bellamy first saw the proposed location, he thought the agents were insane. The New Jersey Turnpike was one of the busiest roads imaginable. A takedown there seemed almost impossible. But he also knew how critical the case was, and he became obsessed with finding a way to control the rest stop. He studied the site repeatedly, sometimes going there in the middle of the night. Agents reviewed aerial photos, maps, and multiple tactical plans. Eventually, they realized they could clear the plaza of civilians. Once that was possible, the plan became more workable. The rest stop was not ideal, but it had advantages. It was not a residential area. Embankments around it could absorb stray gunfire. Most importantly, agents could control the exits. For the plan to work, Mateo had to be the driver. That would allow him to position the getaway car in the back parking lot of the rest stop. He would then get out and walk toward the front of the plaza, as if looking for the armored car. After Mateo left the car, an agent driving a tow truck would enter the back of the plaza and block the vehicle Ryder and his crew were inside. A second FBI vehicle, a pickup truck filled with sand, would be parked between Ryder and an electrical shed. 3 FBI SWAT agents would emerge from the shed, take positions behind the hood and front tire of the truck, and give commands from cover. The sand-filled truck would protect agents from the automatic weapons Ryder and his men were expected to have. Snipers with bolt-action rifles would be positioned on the roof of the rest stop. Agents would confront the suspects immediately with enough firepower to make them think twice. Other agents inside the rest stop would assist the team behind the sand-filled truck. The plan was to surround the car and take the suspects into custody without a shot being fired. But when dealing with one of the FBI's top fugitives, there were no guarantees. On the morning of the planned operation, Mateo was supposed to arrive with Ryder and his crew shortly before the armored car was expected. The surveillance squad was in place. SWAT was ready. Everyone was prepared. Then the scheduled moment came and went. No Ryder, no crew. Agents got the sick feeling that Ryder had beaten them again. Maybe his instincts had warned him something was wrong. Maybe he had found an easier target and cut Mateo out. Or worse, maybe he had discovered Mateo's betrayal. Agents were flying blind, and that meant trouble. They could not reach Mateo. They feared the worst. Then the phone rang. Mateo called Agent Blake and told him Ryder and Cole had not come to his apartment. He did not know why, but the robbery was not going to happen. The operation was called off. It turned out that Cole and another accomplice, Diego Salazar, had been spooked that morning. 2 men had appeared at the landscaping company where Cole and Diego worked. They panicked, believing it was the FBI, and went underground. They were only partly wrong. The men were actually Camden County officers with a warrant for Diego over unpaid child support. Agents scrambled to save the operation. Walsh contacted the sheriff's department and asked if they could tell Diego the warrant had been dismissed, as long as he agreed to pay what he owed. Believing he was about to come into a lot of money, Diego agreed. He said he would have money soon and would pay. With that problem solved, the plan was revived. That night, Ryder called a meeting with Cole and Mateo. It looked like the unexpected break agents needed, but Mateo had no idea where he was being taken. They went to the Ben Franklin Bridge, the main bridge between Camden and Philadelphia. Ryder stayed on the Philadelphia side of the river, while Cole and Mateo remained on the New Jersey side. They used a 2-way radio to discuss the plan. Ryder was eager to make the big score. He ordered them to be ready for the armored car's next delivery. This would be the last chance to use that location because school would soon be back in session. With 2 schools nearby, agents did not want to attempt the operation once children were in the area. This had to be the day. Shortly before the renewed operation, Cole showed up at Mateo's apartment with a bag full of serious weapons. Inside the duffel were rifles, pistols, body armor, masks, gloves, and more than 1,000 rounds of ammunition. They were prepared for war. They were not planning to be taken alive. Agents had to ask a hard question: why wait? Why not arrest Ryder the moment he arrived at Mateo's apartment? The answer was risk. Mateo lived in an apartment surrounded by other apartments. If a firefight erupted there, the people nearby would be in grave danger. The weapons Ryder's crew carried could easily tear through thin apartment walls. The decision was made to let the operation play out at the controlled location. On the morning of the operation, Cole and Diego arrived at Mateo's apartment. For the first time since the plan began, Mateo came face to face with his cousin, Crazy Ryder Delgado. The big job was on. Backing out now could be deadly. Mateo volunteered to go out and get coffee and donuts. That gave him a chance to call the FBI and tell them the crew was at his apartment and the plan was moving forward. Agents immediately alerted surveillance units. They sent the plane airborne to watch the parking lot and identify what vehicles the suspects would use. Air surveillance spotted the men leaving Mateo's apartment. Ground surveillance was told not to follow too closely, but to set up checkpoints and call out when the suspects passed. At that point, the teams deployed to the rest stop. New Jersey State Police SWAT, FBI SWAT, and snipers were already positioned. Agents knew operations like this often fell apart before the final moment, but now it was really happening. The FBI knew the Delgado crew would switch cars in a neighborhood near the service plaza. Then came every agent's nightmare. Air surveillance lost sight of them. One concern was that at the last moment, Ryder might abandon the armored car plan and rob a bank instead. His crew was good at bank robberies, and if they shifted targets, agents would not have a controlled plan in place. They would still know the crew was armed, but they would have to respond in an uncontrolled environment. After several tense moments, Agent Blake got word that the suspect vehicle had been spotted and was heading toward the plaza. Air surveillance reacquired the vehicle and followed it into a nearby neighborhood. That created another concern. Many retirees lived in the area. If residents saw suspicious men and called police, the call might trigger a patrol response and cause Ryder's crew to abort. Agents knew Ryder monitored police calls with a scanner. A concerned neighbor could ruin everything. The FBI had prepared for that too. A detective was placed at the dispatch center to prevent any call from being broadcast in a way that would alert Ryder. With the crew closing in, the FBI takedown team made a final sweep of the plaza. Customers and employees at the rest stop were moved into restrooms with cinderblock walls to keep them safe. Agents locked down the entrance and exit ramps. Undercover state police and FBI agents replaced ordinary customers so the rest stop still looked operational. Then Ryder's car turned into the rear service entrance. Agents confirmed the vehicle. Inside a mechanical shed, Agent Nolan West and two other agents waited. West stood at the door, his hand on the handle. He listened to the radio as Ryder's vehicle approached and parked exactly where it was supposed to park. For a moment, everything seemed to be unfolding exactly as planned. Now the critical move belonged to rookie agent Everett Stone, who was driving the tow truck. He prepared to nose the truck in and block Ryder's car. Inside the shed, West was seconds away from bursting out. But one key part of the plan failed. Mateo was supposed to get out and move away from the car. He did not. Although Mateo stayed inside, commanders decided the plan could still continue. The order went out to execute. Then the suspect vehicle suddenly moved. Ryder's car pulled away and drove toward the front of the plaza. In an instant, the FBI's carefully built plan fell apart. If agents were going to take down Ryder and his heavily armed gang, they had to adapt fast. Ryder's instincts had kicked in. Someone inside the rest stop looked out a window toward the employee parking lot. Ryder saw him and became suspicious. He told Mateo to drive to the front of the plaza so he could look around. If Mateo wanted to stay alive, he had to comply. Agent Stone followed in the tow truck without drawing attention. He pulled up to a gas pump and pretended to fuel the truck, even though it was a diesel vehicle and no diesel was available there. Ryder's car moved through the front parking lot. Then, the crew noticed something strange. There were no civilians, no customers, walking between cars, no normal traffic. The place felt like a ghost town. They knew something was wrong. Ryder told Mateo to back into a spot at the end of the parking lot, giving them a better view of the plaza. But there was nothing normal to see. The rest stop was too empty. Then Ryder spotted a suburban SUV with agents inside. One of the SWAT agents was very tall, and the crew recognized that Suburbans often meant law enforcement. That was enough. Ryder realized they had been set up and ordered Mateo to drive. The suspect vehicle accelerated away. SWAT coordinator Marcus Bellamy ordered Agent Stone to ram Ryder's car. From inside the nearby shed, Agent West and his team heard the escape attempt and moved. They burst out and ran toward the front of the rest stop. As Agent Stone drove toward Ryder's car, Bellamy and his SWAT team sprang from their van. Ryder's vehicle came past the agents and one of them saw an M16 being pointed at them. The agents opened fire on the car. Stone accelerated in the tow truck. As the suspect vehicle slowed under gunfire, he drove into its rear, crushing the trunk and breaking the axle. The impact took the momentum out of the fleeing car. SWAT swarmed the vehicle. Mateo escaped from the car. Cole Delgado, who had been in the front seat, jumped out and tried to run toward the convenience store with a gun in his hand. He was shot and fell. Ryder Delgado and Diego Salazar were trapped in the back seat. The doors were pinned, and FBI SWAT agents surrounded them with shoulder weapons aimed directly at the car. For a moment, it looked as though Ryder and Diego were deciding whether to die in a shootout or surrender. SWAT agents held their fire, bracing for the worst. In those brief seconds, every possible outcome seemed to flash through their minds. Finally, Ryder gave up. As agents approached the car, Ryder lay there and said, "Good job, boys. Next time bring grenades." Agents had heard criminals brag about going down in a blaze of glory. But when confronted with overwhelming force, most gave up. Against armed agents instead of helpless bank tellers, Ryder decided he was not as crazy as his nickname suggested. No one suffered serious injury. The crew was arrested, and investigators gained a major bonus. The clothing the men were wearing closely matched the clothing used in the previous bank robberies. That became key evidence against them. The federal charges were enormous. Ryder and Cole Delgado received life without parole for their roles in 2 bank robberies and the planned armored car robbery. Diego Salazar received a long prison sentence. Investigators later described Ryder's gang as the most dangerous crew they had ever faced. Everyone knew the operation carried great risk, but sometimes risk is necessary for the greater good. Agent Stone was told early in his career that he had already experienced car chases, rooftop chases, and a shootout, and that his career would only get less exciting from there. It remained a good career, but nothing matched the intensity of that first major year. Mateo Cruz, the former police officer who risked his life to help capture his own cousin, was recognized and respected for his crucial role in the takedown. Investigators considered him a hero. He endured dangerous circumstances, showed courage throughout the operation, and without his participation, the case would not have ended the way it did.